It was the journalistic equivalent of an earthquake this week. BuzzFeed News published a document packed with salacious claims about Donald Trump's ties to Russia, enraging the president-elect and sparking a heated debate in the journalism world. Adam Royle has more.
There's been media chatter for months about troubling ties between Donald Trump and Russia. But this week, BuzzFeed took a step that no one else would, printing a 35-page dossier that claimed Russia's cultivated Trump for years, feeding him information about opponents and monitoring his sexual behavior as a precursor to blackmail. While BuzzFeed noted that the allegations are unverified and the report contains errors, editor Ben Smith insisted that publishing was the right call.
I guess our impulse, and I think is to show the audience the underlying document, let them make their own decisions.
Smith also said the document was already being discussed by politicians and the media, including CNN, which described a summary of the dossier right before BuzzFeed put the whole thing online.
This two-page synopsis also included allegations that there was a continuing exchange of information during the campaign between Trump surrogates and intermediaries for the Russian government.
At first, the Trump team didn't comment, but Trump himself weighed in at a press conference the next day, lambasting CNN's White House correspondent Jim Acosta.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
And Trump had this to say about BuzzFeed.
BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage.
Later, Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway sparred with CNN's Anderson Cooper about whether CNN and BuzzFeed were equally blameworthy.
CNN went first yesterday, and BuzzFeed went second.
We didn't report what BuzzFeed reported.
I didn't say that you did.
In the media, it was BuzzFeed that drew denunciations, with the Washington Post's Margaret Sullivan saying it's never been acceptable to publish rumor and innuendo. But BuzzFeed also had its defenders, including the Columbia Journalism Review, which said airing the claims fully would help the press figure out which allegations hold up and which ones don't.
All right, two-part discussion here. We're going to start with BuzzFeed, whether they did the right thing printing that, and then we'll go see talk about what Donald Trump's reaction was and his behavior toward Jim Acosta. I'm fully prepared to be vilified here, but I'm going to defend the printing of the dossier by BuzzFeed. This is a document that's been buzzing around the media world since some reporters were bragging they had it as early as last April. And there's a smugness in the media that we know, well, I have something that no one else had. No one printed it because it was unverifiable, and when you look at it, it seems patently ridiculous and false. I think one of the reasons they printed it was because that. It's like, hey, enough already. This has been going around. It's a rumor. They didn't claim that they had any, special knowledge about its veracity. In fact, they could have done more. They could have said, this is the thing that everybody's talking about. We have no idea if any of it at all is true, but you might as well just take a look at it for yourselves. If they had done something a little bit more blatant like that. I mean, Chuck Todd was tis-tixing on them for not redacting it. Listen, if you're going to print it, print it. And he made the comparison with all the news media coverage of Ben Smith, I should say, from BuzzFeed, about the birther issue, how people were giving that equal treatment as if there were two sides to the discussion. So I'm defending it.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
I figured.
I thought CNN did a public service journalism at its finest by digging around and exposing the fact that our intelligence services had briefed President-elect Trump and President Obama about this raw intelligence, that they thought it had risen to a level that was important enough to brief the incoming and the outgoing president. And then, within minutes, BuzzFeed turned around and completely changed the story and made it all about these completely unverifiable allegations. Not to go all professorial, but there's a wonderful book that I assign to my students called by Bill Kovach and Tom Rosenstiel on the elements of journalism. And one of the things they say is journalism is a discipline of verification. It's not a discipline of flinging stuff out there and letting the public decide. What does that even mean? The public doesn't have its own intelligence agency.
Well, it's not a question of deciding. It's a curiosity factor and said, this is it. That's all we're saying.
Well, it shouldn't have come from a news organization that wants to take itself seriously.
Emily, if you don't mind, I'm going to lovingly and respectfully ridicule your argument. May I borrow this for a second? Here's a document that's been buzzing around the Beat the Press universe. Let's see. Oh, wow, my. Ben Smith, the editor of BuzzFeed, his name in capital letters, like in the BuzzFeed document, he eats kitty litter and he blows his nose with his hand and he drinks directly out of the milk bottle in the fridge without using a glass, and on it goes. Can't verify any of this, but I'm going to just throw it out there and let you make up your mind. Well, that's not fair to Ben. I could have said a lot harsher stuff, like what that document said about Trump. You can't do that. Jelani Cobb, I believe his name is, the excellent New Yorker writer, has a great piece in the current issue about the history of the Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, the national holiday, and notes that at one point during an early Senate debate over whether or not to honor Dr. King in this way, some dirtbag senator, Jesse Helms, tried to introduce the FBI files on Dr. King on the floor of the Senate. And Daniel Patrick Moynihan took the document and threw it on the floor and said, "This is filth." And we need to remember that any kind of garbage can be thrown into a police report or an intelligence file. Without verification, it's not publication worthy.
I also think what happened with BuzzFeed, and again, disagreeing, I'm sorry, with your argument, is that we've seen it before, where you have the information, but it's really questionable whether you should put it out there. So you're going to wait till somebody else first puts it out, and then you have cover to come out with even more details. So someone else may have broken the story, but we have the real story. We're going to lay it all out there. And I
everybody
get
else
the
was
sense
talking
that
about it.
Everybody was right, but they
just say
but they could have
this
gone
wasn't
with
a
it
rumor.
before.
This was a document.
Right.
It was full of rumors and lies, but it was a document.
But
I want to give everybody else a shot.
On that, listen, David Korn from Mother Jones did this first, way back when, and he said, "I didn't put all this out because we don't have the facts." This, to me, is very reminiscent of WikiLeaks, when we sat here and talked about what does it mean for us to take a document which was stolen and we don't know if what's in what they're putting out is right. You just can't do it. I know. That's what I'm saying.
Everybody did.
And I'm saying that's wrong.
And we said it. Clinton, and now everybody's taking the
I'm saying it was wrong then and it was wrong now.
In every case, the reporters went to the Clinton campaign and said, "Will you verify this?" And they said, "No, we will not verify it."
All right.
So what are you going to do?
Second part of this, and that is Donald Trump's reaction, and specifically his reaction to Jim Acosta from CNN. He was conflating what BuzzFeed did with what CNN did, which was they talked about it rather than release it. He was saying it's the same, and then he was basically calling them fake news and denying him a question at that press conference. What did you think of that?
Well, I mean, I was shocked, first of all, at the kind of language that was being used at a presidential news conference, and it was disturbing. It could have just been ignoring Jim Acosta and moving on. Jim Acosta, I should say, could have backed off. I mean, I think he was making a point. Well, I mean, he did the right thing in protesting, but I think there's a point where you might go a little too far in drawing attention to yourself or trying to blow this up into something bigger, which I think that's what happened. I mean, it ended up becoming much bigger. But, I mean, it was shocking. I mean, it really threw me off when I saw that.
John, you pointed out a tweet to me this week, which from a congressman in Texas, Randy Weber, who said the CNN reporter who was disruptive to the press briefing and disrespectful to Trump should be fired and prohibited from any press briefings. That's from a congressman.
Yeah, well, this is what I hope that all of your viewers will keep in mind always, which is that, particularly when you talk about politics, for the most part, these men and women have no interest in your First Amendment rights and the public's right to know. They want to cover their rear ends and get their spin out there and bolster their side of the argument. And they would happily, I mean, I'm surprised he didn't suggest that Acosta be led away in handcuffs the way they would do in the Soviet Union.
Well, they're threatening
Russia.
Yes,
they're threatening that he may not be able to be in a press conference in the future.
The lack of support for Acosta from the other reporters was kind of shocking.
Pitiful.
And maybe everybody was just so taken aback they didn't know what to do.
They're also self-important.
But I hope that they all get together and talk among themselves. And the next time this happens, I hope they all just get up and walk out.
I couldn't say it better than you just said it. The thing that I think happened there was everybody was so anxious to ask him a question because there hadn't been anything. So people just couldn't even hear themselves because they were just trying to get their 3-part or 5-part question in because they don't know when the next time they'll get a chance to ask.
Exactly.